On today's Hot Zone, we're going to talk about the protests going on in Iraq, which you may not have heard much about in the mainstream media. And we're going to visit hurricane season because it's time to get prepared if you're not. We're going to take a look back at Hurricane Florence and Hurricane Michael. We're also going to talk about my new upcoming book. That's coming up on today's Hot Zone.
This is the Hot Zone. Engaging with the news in a whole new way, international war correspondent Chuck Holton brings insight into areas of crisis and lets you help those affected.
Hey folks, Chuck Holton here. Thanks for being a part of the Hot Zone. It's a beautiful day here in Panama. And welcome to all of our new viewers from LifeZet. We've gotten picked up over there and starting today. So I hope we get a bunch of new viewers. This is a podcast that tries to bring you news from around the world, especially zones of crisis and war and disaster that you're not going to hear much about on the mainstream media. And that's because there are tons of things happening around the world that bear mention, but in reality, the news media in the United States is so focused these days on politics. They're so focused on Donald Trump. They're so focused on the election that there's a lot of hurting people out there that need help. There's a lot of interesting things happening around the world that you're just not hearing about. So I'm bringing that to you. First, we're going to talk about what's going on in Iraq. There's been about 8 or 9 days of protests now in Baghdad and almost 100 people killed. So if you haven't heard about that on the news, just ask yourself, why not? The reason for these protests are just because of the economic woes that are kind of perceived in Iraq right now, although Iraq actually has a pretty high GDP. It's grown alongside other countries in the region. It's over $17,000 per capita right now. But young people, especially in Iraq, are increasingly out of work. The last time they even published unemployment figures in Iraq was something like 2007, and they haven't published them since then. Back then, unemployment was 13% overall, and it's got to be worse than that now. So, yeah, the people are mad, and they've been out burning tires and protesting, and in true Iraqi fashion, the government just sort of started shooting people. Although they claim they haven't shot people, they've only used less lethal means, but there were some snipers taking people out from rooftops, and nobody really knows who they belong to, but suffice it to say, almost 100 people have been killed already. The government, for its part, has offered, they've sat down with the protesters, they've offered to give jobs, give away lots of money. They're doing everything they can to pretty much stop these protests. And I don't think that long-term that's a good strategy. What they've been doing is saying, anybody that has a master's degree or above in Iraq, we will immediately put you on the payroll for the government. Doesn't matter what you know or what you can do or whether we have a job for you, we're going to put you on the payroll. We're going to build 100,000 new housing units. We're going to subsidize this and subsidize that. We're going to try to give some money away, and we're going to, all of this to try to appease these protesters. But so far, it hasn't worked. I don't know what the protesters really expect. I mean, you can't do magic in a country 1 year after they elected a new president. They ought to be taking their oil money rather than giving it away on social programs. They ought to be investing it in infrastructure, which would allow the whole country to grow and allow the whole country to do better. But that's not the easy fix, and very often the government does what's easy and what they think will buy them votes rather than doing the harder long-term development that will really result in a more prosperous country. So that's Iraq. Now, let's move on to Hurricane Florence. A year ago, we were just recovering from Hurricane Florence and about to get hit by Hurricane Michael in Florida. I was at both of those disasters. Here's a little bit of what that was like.
So we did a lot of immediate action drills, remove the debris, the trash, the trees that had fallen, just kind of quick cleanup to get the big things out of the way and just kind of get yourself out from underneath the immediate mess. And then slowly start to figure out where the damage is, triage it, what's the worst, what's the best, try to separate what things are you're just not going to be able to save among the things that you can save.
When you drive around the base here, you can see some of the roofs starting to be repaired. You can see where projects are in place, starting to prepare to demolish some of the buildings that need to come down. and then build new where it makes sense and do it right this time so that we have a much more resilient infrastructure that's going to last us really for the foreseeable future.
You know, the families have been tremendous in supporting, being patient, and understanding that it takes a long time to fix a lot of the damage. There's still a lot of work left to be done. It'll probably be 5 years before we have recovered from Hurricane Florence.
And I'm in Fayetteville, North Carolina today, and this is, as you know, pretty far inland, but what we're seeing is just the steady rise of all of the rivers, essentially, in North Carolina. There are more than 17 rivers that are over flood stage. This, the river I'm standing near right now, I'm in an evacuation zone. Anywhere within 1 mile of the Cape Fear River, which goes through Fayetteville, has been evacuated, and that's because this river is expected to crest more than 10 feet above flood stage. What that means is that it's very difficult to get around in North Carolina right now. It's difficult for power crews, for first responders, for rescuers even, to get into the areas where people need help the most because so many roads are flooded out right now. As a matter of fact, it took us about twice as long to get down here as it should have this morning because of all the detours we had to make to get around the flooded areas. What that means is that you are on your own. And what we're seeing is in places that are cut off, like Wilmington, which is the 8th largest city in North Carolina, there are reports of looting. And that is partially probably because people were not prepared. Now, yesterday I got footage of long lines of people standing in line for any store that was open, any little gas station, any little liquor store, anything where people could get food or water or diapers or anything like that. And it just goes to show how poorly prepared many people were who also chose not to evacuate. And that might be because they just didn't have the money to do either one. But the bottom line is that now people are getting desperate already just a few days after the storm. Now, as I continue to say to people, you need to be prepared. Even if you don't live in a hurricane zone, you just never know what could happen. Here in Panama, we don't get hurricanes because the northern part of Colombia shields us from that. So we don't really get any natural disasters. We get plenty of rain. We don't have drought. We don't get fires, floods, earthquakes. Well, we get some earthquakes, but so far nothing that has actually made any difference. So it's a pretty safe place to live, but I can promise you I've got a generator, I've got solar generators, I've got solar lights, I've got means to protect myself, we've got some food stored up, and that's just because it's a good idea. One of the things that my new book talks about is exactly that. Now, I want to talk about my book for just a second. The name of the book is Prowess, and the subtitle is The Man You Were Meant to Be. It's a takeoff of my book, Making Men, and basically what's happened is that so many guys have come to me over the last 8 years as I've gone around the country speaking about making men, and they've come up to me with the same set of questions over and over again. And just basically wanting more information about what manhood really looks like, how does that break down into real concrete suggestions in my life. And a lot of questions really have to do with either girls or money from the young guys. And so this new book basically is 3 books put together. It's the first book, section is about what a warrior's life is like. Not everybody can be a warrior. A warrior is a calling. It's a very special, lifestyle that takes an inordinate amount of discipline. I think most people can't even fathom the true amount of discipline that true warriors have to have. Because if you're a warrior, a true warrior, and you're out there on the pointy edge of the spear, if you're not the most disciplined guy in the fight, good chance you're not going to come out of that fight. So it's a matter of life and death for these guys, and they take their jobs very, very seriously. So the first section of the book is what can we learn from the warrior, and how can we put that into practice in our everyday life? The second section is messages to the young lions from the old lions, the guys that have survived the fight for some time. And answering those age-old questions of how do I provide for myself when I get out on my own? How do I get a girlfriend and make her my wife? And questions like that. The third section of the book is specifically letters written to guys in certain areas of life, in certain times of life. So the guy that's 23 or 24 years old that's still living on his mom's couch trying to find out what he wants to do with his life, but spending most of his time playing video games. Letters to guys like that. Letters to guys who come from broken homes. Letters to girls about how to understand your own needs, your own hardwired necessities as a woman, and how not to get taken advantage of by a guy playing to those necessities. And also some actual correspondence with guys who have written me with specific questions that I think might help everybody. So that's the book, Prowess. It's coming out very soon. I could probably get it out this week, but I'm going to try to hold off a week or two and get it out right around the end of October. And really do it right. We're going to have an audio version and a print version and an electronic version, and we're going to have some special packages of those for Hot Zone subscribers. So I hope you'll go and subscribe. It's only $3 a month over at patreon.com/hotzone, or you can go send PayPal and donate to help support the podcast. So get a hold of us on Facebook, like and share the podcast wherever you watch it. Thanks for watching. I'm Chuck Holton.
The Hot Zone is produced by Amy Holton and Livefire Media. Copyright 2019.